will of God. What does God want to do in this situation? How is God going to handle this situation? Abiathar, you're the priest. You bring the ephod. We've got to find out what God says about this matter. God's solution, not mine, God's solution. You know, that takes stepping out by faith, doesn't it? Sure does. There may be some young person here today. You're wondering, what is God going to do in my life? Well, God has the answer. He's the eternal God. He's the God that inhabits eternity. See? He knows all about the situation. He can lead, and you say, but that is rather frightening to think that I've got to commit myself to His judgment, to His decisions, to His will in my life. David may have faced that. But he said, in this hour of trial, where else can I turn? Bring the ephod. What does God have to say about it? And God had a lot to say about it. Notice as you go on, in verse number 8, and David inquired at the Lord, saying, shall I pursue this troop? Shall I overtake them? And he answered him, God said, David, you get on your horse and you go after them. You go, that's not in the text, but I just throw that in. For thou shalt surely overtake them and without fail recover all. David, you're going to get everything back again. Without fail, go. Now, how in the world was David going to go against the enemy? 200 of his guys were so stressed out, they said, we'll sit by the brook Basor. All right, you sit there. You enjoy the cool, refreshing waters of the brook Basor. You relax and you rest. We'll go. So he took the folks with him. And God did a miracle. God did a miracle. How do you do that miracle? Verse 10. Or verse 9. So David went, he and the 600 men that were with him, and came to the brook Basor, where those that were left behind stayed. The 200 stayed there, the others went. Verse 10. But David pursued, he and 400 men. For 200 abode behind, which were so faint that they could not go over the brook Basor. Verse 11. And guess what they found? They found an Egyptian. Most unlikely person you ever want to find, an Egyptian. What's he got to do with this story? Well, this is God's messenger, Egyptian. Least likely place you want to find a messenger is Egyptian. And so here's this Egyptian, and this is what happened. He found an Egyptian in the field and brought him to David and gave him bread, and he did eat. And they made him drink water. They gave him a piece of cake of figs, 2 clusters of raisins, and when eaten, his spirit came again to him, for he had eaten no bread, nor drunk any water 3 days and 3 nights. So for 3 days, this poor Egyptian's out in the wilderness, starving to death. But God kept him there. He didn't run away. He didn't hide. He had nothing to eat. Here he was, hungry, 3 days without food. But God, in His mercy and grace, said, stay there, I've got a message for you to deliver. Most unlikely messenger. There he is. And he stayed there. They found an Egyptian in the field. Notice, verse 13, David said to him, to whom belongest thou? And whence art thou? Where'd you come from? He said, I'm a young man of Egypt, servant to, an Amalekite, and my master left me because 3 days ago I fell sick. 3 days ago I got sick. Well, you know, sometimes God can send you an upset stomach. I was preaching in a little church many years ago. It's about on a Sunday like this. And there weren't too many people there. And they said, can you come and teach Sunday school and preach? So I said, yeah, I'll come. Well, I barely made it through Sunday school. And I should have said, folks, I better go home quickly. But I didn't. I stayed there, and I got halfway through the best message I ever preached. I mean, I don't know what I preached, but it must have been good. And my head was going around, and I looked like I had a double crowd out there. I mean, I thought I had a great crowd that day, just a few people. And finally, I sat down, and a dear lady brought me a wet cloth, and I mopped my brow. They thought I was dying. I wasn't dying. I just picked up a virus someplace along the line. And so that Egyptian had been sick 3 days. Why did not the Amalekites kill him? Huh? I would say, hey, I don't want to leave anything behind. I'm going to kill this guy. Get rid of him. He's not any benefit to us. Let's get rid of him. But God had some intentions for that man, and God spared him. God kept him there 3 days in the wilderness until he could make contact, until God's message was delivered. And the message was simple. Verse 14, we made an invasion upon the south of Kerethites, and upon the coast that belonged to Judah, and upon the south of Caleb. And we burned Ziklag. And David said to him, canst thou bring me down to this company? Where are they? That's my wife, my children, my goods. Where are they? In the wilderness. And this Egyptian said, I'll take you there. And so God's messenger took David. David sought the guidance of God. It may take more than 3 days. It may take some pondering. It may take some, we said it back in the old-fashioned days when we didn't get so sophisticated, as we are now. We used to pray through things. How many ever hear people praying through on something? Yeah, about 3 of us. Thank God for it. Yeah, we used to pray through on things. Somebody call them and say, we got to pray about this. I mean, folks got busy about it, and sometimes it got so intense that they meet in somebody's house at night. My wife can tell you that. We go to somebody's house and say, let's have a prayer meeting here and pray about this thing. How long are we going to pray? Well, we'll pray till we get the answer. But we're too sophisticated for that for today. And we have all the excuses. Our favorite TV program comes on at 9 o'clock. Not really. But you know what I'm saying. And David believed the promise of God and was guided by an Egyptian. Here's the end of it, and we'll quit. I mean that. Skip down to verse number 17. And David smote them from the twilight even unto the evening, and next day. And there escaped not a man of them, save 400 young men, which rode upon camels and fled. And David recovered all that the Amalekites had carried away. And David rescued his 2 wives. He went back to the book Basor. And the 600 men that followed David said, David, those 200 that were too weak to pursue the enemy, they get nothing. David said, no, no. This is the grace of God. This is how God works. This is handling our stress biblically. They that tarried there by the stuff, they help wreak the victory. And thank God for that. David strengthened himself in the Lord. David sought the guidance of God. David believed God's promise. And David acted by faith.